Hi, I'm Chris McBrien, a Gen-Xer, and the pop culture from my generation is awesome.
And I'm Yancy Eaton, a Millennial, and the pop culture from my generation is dope.
Episode 10, Star Wars, the original trilogy. Hey, it's Chris McBrien here. This is Pop Culture World. I'm along with Yancy Eaton as always. Yancy, big show tonight, obviously, but we'll get to that in a second. How's everything going, buddy?
Chris, you stuck up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerd herder. How are you?
It's nerf herder, you dumb millennial.
Oh my!
But it's all good though. Hey, I'm doing good. What's new and exciting this week, bud?
Not a whole lot. Just working, keeping the pimp hand strong, just doing what I can. It was really cool, just kind of like researching Star Wars and looking up, different scenes and stuff that I'd maybe forgotten about. It was just kind of nice to like delve back into it. I'd been so focused on, The Force Awakens for the last 2-3 months that, it's nice to go back and kind of see where it all started. And I don't know, it's just been a lot of fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Before we get into it, I want to mention something, a little bit of a diversion, but I guess this is kind of a retro thing too, is Stranger Things. Now, the last time I asked you about Stranger Things, you were like vaguely like sort of heard of it, but I noticed recently on Twitter your cover pic was like a Stranger Things font, so I'm assuming that you like the show. You've discovered it, you've watched the whole thing. Yeah,
I finally just, I don't know, I randomly seen it on like the front like suggested page on Netflix.
Nice.
And I'm like, you know what, I don't have anything to do tonight, I'll just watch one episode. And then of course I stayed up the entire night watching it. It was fantastic, and I got my wife on it, she started watching it too. It's like a perfect love story to like every 80s film you can possibly think of. It's not corny at all. It's really just like homage after homage to like all these different movies, and it's just well done. The acting's amazing, and just the cinematography is just incredible. I mean, I'm about to watch it again this weekend, to be honest with you. It's a really, really awesome series, and I hope it has 10 seasons.
I'm assuming that we should possibly do an episode on Stranger Things in the future sometime, eh? We'll definitely do that. They're going to be coming out with season 2 at some point, right? So...
Yeah, they said sometime next year, which is like painful. Normally, whenever I hear about a really good series on Netflix, I actually wait for it to finish so that I can just binge watch it all at once. I know with Breaking Bad, I got completely caught up on Netflix, on Netflix with Breaking Bad, and then as soon as the actual season or series finale came on regular TV, I watched it live. So that was kind of like neat timing. But I'm not going to be able to wait for the Stranger Things. I'm going to have to jump right into it.
That's the thing with you millennials. You like to just wait and binge watch the whole thing. But let me tell you, sometimes I remember you sometimes had to wait like a whole week between shows.
Yeah.
In the old school ways. And funny enough, with tonight's topic, you had to actually wait 3 years between each film. Go figure. But anyway, you ready to get started tonight?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
All right, let's go.
Yeah, I don't want to get a whole bunch of hate mail and stuff.
I think Jaws is one of the greatest movies ever made.
Have you seen it, Chris?
It was awesome.
And I literally lost it.
Night of the Living Dead.
That movie literally terrified me.
People were running out of the theater.
Wait, what?
See, I'm young, I'm hip, and I speak the language of the streets.
Yes, word.
Okay, so the thing is, it's the original trilogy. We're not going to get too much into the prequels, thankfully, but we will have a show dedicated to the prequels at some point in the future. But tonight, we're talking about Star Wars, the original trilogy. I'm curious, Yancy, because I'm going to share my experience with it, but I'd like to know yours. How old were you when you saw the first film? Well, under what circumstances? How did you view it? And what media do you use to watch it? So tell me a little bit about how old you were and your experience with the very first Star Wars movie. And that's the very first one, the one from 1977.
So I can't give you like a specific age. I can't remember the exact moment when I saw it. And that's kind of because Star Wars was always kind of there. It was, my mom and dad always had the box set on VHS. And I just always remember having watched it like a million times. I went through like a period of, between like 8 to 11 years old whenever episode 1 actually came out, where I was just obsessed with Star Wars, and I would just watch the films over and over and over. And I wore those VHS tapes out. So like, I can't pinpoint exactly when I first seen it, but like, it was not my mom or dad's favorite movie, but they liked it a lot. Everybody in my family would sit down and watch it with me. But I mean, it was one of those things where if we didn't have anything to do, we would kill whole weekends just watching the Star Wars, having a marathon and watching all 3 movies in one day. It was just always there, kind of like in the background.
So in other words, the first time that you watched Star Wars was on television.
A TV?
Yeah, was on a television set, like watching it by VHS.
Yes,
VHS
like an old school television set.
Wow, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, so
why is that unbelievable, Chris?
well, okay, because I'm gonna take you back. Okay, so the year is 1977. It was June 1977. The movie had come out in May, and it was in Kitchener, Ontario. My uncle Phil, who is still a great guy, he took me as a 7-year-old. He took me to the movie theater to see this new film called Star Wars that everyone was like raving about, right? So we went in there, a 7-year-old in the theater. The lights go down. First of all, 20th Century Fox logo comes up, and the thing was with that, starting right from the logo, the one thing that Lucas did in the original Star Wars movie was he brought back the fanfare. So what I mean by that is, way back, 20th Century Fox had the fanfare, dun 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 dun, the fanfare that comes up on the logo. Well, they had gotten rid of it for years. They didn't use it anymore. They just went dun 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 dun, and the movie came on. He put the fanfare back in, and it's become so much synonymous with the original Star Wars trilogy, but it was something that was around for years previous. But like I said, he brought it back. So anyway, there's that, and then there's that full screen logo with the huge opening orchestral note, and which fades away and then goes automatically into the scroll, and you read the scroll, and then it pans down. You see the planet of Tatooine. You see Tantive 4 come overhead, and then you see the Star Destroyer coming over. And as a 7-year-old watching that Star Destroyer go overhead in a movie theater, I was mesmerized. I had never seen anything like it. I will never experience anything that's that visceral again in my life. It was like, you hear people talk about it, and I'm telling you it's true. It was life-changing. It changed my life. In 1977, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have anything. We didn't have home movies. There was none of that stuff. So, seeing something that big was just, it was just unbelievable. It blew me away. And I'm very lucky, I guess, because I was 7 to be in the theater to see that. And, and not to get too much of like a history lesson or anything, but if you, the biggest things in the world, from a pulp culture point of view, usually are those things that the timing is just perfect. It's just perfect timing. And like, if you think about the Beatles, the timing was just perfect for them, and Star Wars was the same way. If you go back to like the 70s, the early 70s, movies were pretty much a bunch of downers. There was a lot of downer movies going on. If you take a look, a movie like Easy Rider, becomes a hit. Like, how the hell did that become a hit with audiences? The movie's a downer. And
it's just a reflection of culture at that time. That was a really tough decade.
Because the Vietnam War was going on. Now all of a sudden the Vietnam War is over. Okay? Maybe it's perfect time for the country to turn the chapter. To turn the page, turn to a new chapter of the history. And the thing is that up until that point, there was there wasn't as much orchestral music and stuff like that to sort of start off your movie that way was like unheard of. And the thing is, when Lucas did his original cut of the film and showed it to all of his friends, like Spielberg and De Palma and all those guys, they all had pretty much the same reaction. They were like, "Oh, geez, better luck next time, George. It's not really that good, And but when audiences saw it, Lucas actually took off. When the movie was getting ready to be released in theaters, he took off and went to Hawaii with him and his wife. He needed a break. He was burnt out from making the movie, and he just thought, I'm just going to go out there and let this movie just bomb, and we're done. We're all in trouble. And all of a sudden, well, wait a minute, what? People are going crazy for this thing? And like people like me that were 7, and kids were like the real big audience, right? Saw it and just lost our minds, and adults did too, because like I say, you're coming off all these downer movies. Vietnam War is over, this movie comes out, and the thing is, if you go back and watch the original Star Wars, it's a lot of fun to watch. It's a lot of fun to watch Star Wars. So when audiences needed that at the time, and they needed that uplifting story, and like the young guy is ambitious, and he takes on the Empire, and they win. You know what I mean? And it was just so great. So it was all those things kind of together, working together, that made it such a big hit. So it was massive for me, and I just find it so interesting because. Like your first experience, you could say, was watching it on a television set with VHS, and like I say, mine was in the movie theater, like it just being like just riveted. I couldn't believe what I was watching. Like it just blew me away, and everything was just so good. And the thing with movies is most movies have about 8 to 10 minutes to get you. And that something's got to happen in those first 8 to 10 minutes. And if you look at a movie like Star Wars and what happens in the first 8 to 10 minutes, wow. Like just blow you away. It was so cool, and especially with the special effects of the time, it was just so important. So for me, it was life changing.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah, of course.
Chris,
yeah.
How many times did you see it in theaters?
Oh, wow. In theaters? Now, again, this is back in the day when I was in a small town and getting to a movie theater was tough. We had to go over to Kitchener, which was the closest city to me when I was growing up. But in the theaters, I probably saw it, I would say, probably 5 to 7 times originally, and that was a lot in those days, like for me to get over to Kitchener and go see it again.
That's still a lot.
Oh, it's a lot, and especially for my parents to be like, again? Like, you've already seen it. You're like, I don't understand. Why do you want to go again? Because you got to think, too, up until that point, the idea of the blockbuster was relatively new. It really didn't start until 1975 with Jaws. Before that, there was you didn't go see a movie more than once. You went to see it. The movie was good. You're done. You're done with it. And Jaws was one of those movies that people would go back again and again and again to see. And Star Wars just blew Jaws out of the water. People would line up literally around the block. Like, that's why when people call now, like, say, oh, there's a blockbuster. It's like, oh yeah, Bridesmaids was a blockbuster. Bridesmaids wasn't a friggin' blockbuster. Mm-hmm. People did not wait around the block, literally in lines to see it, and that's what it was. But yeah, so maybe like 5 to 7 times in the theater, which at the time was like, I guess a pretty big deal. No two ways about it.
People do not do that anymore. I will say this: whenever Episode 1 first came out, I was 11 years old, and obviously I didn't have like the financial means or the transportation to go see it as many times as I wanted to, but whenever the next film came out, the Attack of the Clones came out, I had a job by that point. And I remember that summer I probably went and seen it 6 or 7 times. You know what I mean? And whenever Episode 3 came out, same thing, 6, 7 times. And those weren't even good films. Like, right. If I could take, a time machine back and to see something like that in theaters for the first time, to have that first cut, like you said, the scroll coming down and seeing it like that, I mean, that would just be absolutely wild. To see it on like a little 27-inch old tube TV, it was still awesome.
Still awesome, exactly. Like you said, I find that amazing because it still got you, right? Because it's such a powerful movie and it's such a great fun movie to watch that it still got you, regardless of the medium it's on. But like I say, just to be in that theater as a 7-year-old to watch it, like it was like I can't even explain. I can't explain magic. There's no other way to describe it other than magic. And the thing is, too, if you think about it, up until that time, science fiction movies. You know what science fiction movies were? They were basically like people in like shiny jumpsuits, and everything was clean and bright and all this. And Star Wars came along, and it was like. It was dirty and everything was grimy and you could see the rivets and it was like lived in this world. Heck, the very first the words that you see on the screen are a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So it took place in the past. Wait a minute, science fiction is supposed to take place in the future. Like it kind of threw everything on its head, right? That's what got me about the prequels too. And I'm like I say, we'll get into that in another show. But the fact that you go back and watch the prequels and it's like Lucas forgot that his world should be like lived in and dirty, and instead it's starting to look clean and CG, and anyway, it's a mess. But so I'm curious. This is when I was at Fan Expo a couple weekends ago. Mark Hamill was there, did a Q&A. I mentioned it. It was like it was the greatest thing of the weekend, and I thought it was interesting. This guy gets up because he took a Q&A from the audience, right? And one guy from the audience gets up and says, which of the original trilogy is your favorite? And it was just funny. The whole audience was just like, oh my God, like how could you ask him that? That's like a terrible question to ask. But so I'm curious, like for yourself, of the original trilogy, do you have a favorite of the 3 movies? And if so, which one is it and why?
I think it's easily Empire Strikes Back. Probably 90% of the people in the world that you ask would all say this. I think of the 3, it just does the best at like really developing the characters and the relationships with each other. It's super, super dark. It's really, really heavy. I think it's like the heart and soul of the entire franchise. That includes every movie, every little spin-off or animated thing or, Christmas special, whatever. It is the absolute heart and soul of the movie. I think if you had to rank like the top 20 or 25 best scenes of the entire franchise, probably 15 of them are in Empire Strikes Back. It's just, disproportionately excellent compared to the other films. It's probably, I don't know, my second or third favorite movie of all time.
And the funny thing is, I agree with you. I do agree because I think Empire was the best of the original trilogy. And Mark Hamill's answer was Empire as well. He said Empire was his favorite. And the thing is, too, okay, again, not to give a history lesson, but just think about it. Like back then, when a movie came out that was successful, that was it. A movie came out, it was successful, it was done. Sequels were always inferior. always. You look at Jaws 2. You know, the only exception to that rule actually was in 1974.
Terminator.
Well, no, this is before that. I'm talking at Star Wars time, when Star Wars came out in 77. Okay. Before that, in 74, was Godfather 2. Godfather 2 was as good as the first one. It won an Oscar for Best Picture as well. It was as good as the original, if not better. So, but other than that, like other than Coppola, like no one else did a sequel that was, you know, anywhere near the original.
It's really hard. You know, it's like with music. Like they talk about, you know, anytime you ever have like a rapper, like everybody talks about, oh, Jay-Z fell off or Eminem fell off, or even just musicians in general. You got to think like their whole life they were thinking of this one thing, right? Like all their creativity, their entire, you know, juvenile life was put into making this one first album. It's going to be the most creative, the most diverse thing they've ever done, and then everything after that is going to be kind of like a different iteration of that same thing. You know what I mean? So just by default, just the way that art works most of the time, it's always going to be, you know, the original is almost always going to be better. So to have something that actually holds up as a sequel is just, I mean, it's so rare. I can't name a single band where it's like, you know what, I really like their third album a lot better than their first one. It's
other than the
so
Beatles,
rare.
maybe the Beatles, you know.
Yeah.
But you're totally right,
Yeah.
and that's the thing, because I think we got to get hung up on that word original, because the first one is so original that you just can't capture that magic again the second time. But you know what? And you know what? At the time too, when they were getting ready to make the second one, and you know, not that I'm trying to slag, you know, Lucas or anything, but I mean, like you know, he goes on, like now he changed it to, you know, episode. Then the second one was going to be called Episode 5, and you know, and all that stuff. But when the first one came out, it was called Star Wars. In the original crawl in the theater, there was no Episode 4. It was Star Wars. That's it. And in fact, when they decided to go in and they actually signed the contracts to make the second movie, the working title was Star Wars 2. So all that other crap about, you know, episode 4, 5, that all came later. Lucas likes to rewrite history sometimes. And, but anyway, the still at the time, even when they were working on it, it was still like, well, like they had trouble getting funding from the studio and stuff. And you got to figure, how could they do that? It's the most successful movie of all time, because sequels always sucked. So, you know, Star Wars is not going to be any different in their minds. So we're not going to fund this picture. So Lucas had to put all of his chips in with all the money he made from Star Wars, and basically had to help really fund a lot of Empire himself. You know, obviously it worked out pretty well, but I mean, he didn't even direct it, and he had to get a director for it. And the thing is, then he got Irvin Kershner, who, you know, had done movies like a little bit more moody movies, like, you know, Eyes of Lower Mars and stuff like that. And like you said, the movie he made with Empire was a lot moodier, and it was darker and all that stuff. And the thing was, when they hired him to make the movie, he was actually going over budget a bit, but what he was really going over on was time. He was taking way too long to do the shots, and like something that should take a couple of days was taking him a week and a half or 2 weeks or a month. And so people were getting scared. But the only thing that saved it was, as the dailies were coming back, they were looking at the dailies and they were like, wow, this is good. Like when the dailies came back for the original Star Wars movie.
Forgive my ignorance, but what do you mean by the dailies? Okay,
so when you're on a movie set and you're shooting, what you'll do is you'll take whatever you shot that day, and it's just raw footage, right? Mm-hmm. Well, some producers will want to get their hands on it and take a look at it, because like, hey, if we're putting up $11 million to make this movie, that was the original budget for Star Wars, if we're going to put up $11 million in 1975, 1976 to make this, we want to see some results. What are you guys doing, right? So they want to take a look at, and a lot of times they'll look at the dailies. And as the dailies came back for Star Wars, they were bad. And like people were like, and I've seen some of the cuts, and I'm sure lots of our listeners, you know, have watched documentaries and stuff and seen some of them, and some of the cuts were bad. Like, oh, they were bad. And because there was no sound effects, there was no music. Anthony Daniels spoke his lines through a mask. So did David Prowse. You know, they spoke their lines with English accents through a mask and stuff. So you're like, what is this mess? But when the dailies were coming back from Empire, different story, because it was like Irvin Kershner's a very talented director. The lighting was great. The cinematography was amazing. Like, it was like, wow, this guy's doing some really good work. So we gotta give him some slack. You know what I mean? But then obviously, you know, the picture came out and it blew everybody away, because it was like, sequels are not better, and that one was. You know, and that's what was so amazing about it. So I think I agree. I think the Empire would be my favorite one, even though the magic all started, you know, 3 years prior with the first one. Do you have any like favorite scenes? Or maybe like one favorite scene from the trilogy? Not to put you on the spot, but I mean, the whole trilogy, like, was there like one scene in it that was your favorite?
I like let me think about it. I like the carbonite chamber scene with Han, obviously. That whole thing is just incredibly well done. And you were talking about like the cinematography, like the red light, ornaments, stuff like that. Yeah. They actually, bring that back whenever in The Force Awakens, that same kind of light kind of thing, whatever. Yep. I'm not going to give any spoilers to that, but you see there's a consistency between the films with the color and lighting and stuff like that. That's one of my favorites. The whole corny, like, I love you, and the brash as hell Han Solo says I know, what I mean, like literally as he's being frozen in carbonite. I like the asteroid field scene, like never tell me the odds kind of thing.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, though, I think probably my favorite individual scene was the Battle of Hoth. Just because like they did so much with so little. Like it's a barren landscape that they're using. It's all snow and everything like that. But just what they did with the what was the AT-ATs is I'm getting it correct. Okay. There's just so many.
We'll talk about that later in the show. I'll come back to that. Remind me.
But yeah, Battle of Hoth is probably my single favorite scene. Everybody wants to say like the Vader's reveal. Obviously that's the best scene of all time, but just to give a caveat, it's probably Battle of Hoth for me.
I think I'm going to go right to the very, very end of the trilogy to give you my favorite. And this is where it gets me emotionally, because the thing is, this is going to be a bit of a surprise for you, because the thing is, like, you've probably only ever seen like the special editions and things like that, right? Or have you ever had a chance to see the original cut of the film on VHS?
I did.
Ooh, that's awesome.
But it was so long ago, Chris, that like I can't even speak to like the differences between them.
So my favorite scene of the whole trilogy was the very, very last scene. And to me, the very last scene of the trilogy is like the cherry on top. And you talk about redemption, you talk about tying a story together and having it's very gratifying for an audience to have closure, and it's very gratifying to see things come full circle. And the thing is, throughout the second movie and the third movie, what you saw was, Ben was killed in the first movie, right? So then he comes back as a ghost, right? In the second one. Then Yoda dies, but he comes back as a ghost, right at the very, very end, because Ben had come back to Luke a couple times, and at the very, very end of the movie, after Luke burns Vader, which by the way was another scene that they put in the movie. In the final cut of the movie was Luke dragging Vader, in the Death Star and trying to get him into the spaceship, and they left it at that. But then they thought, you know what, people might think he's alive. They still might not have closure that he actually died there. So then they went back on Skywalker Ranch out in California, and they shot the scene where Luke burns Vader's body on the funeral pyre. But then they're all celebrating. Remember, the Ewoks are like doing the drumming on the stormtrooper helmets, and everybody's dancing, and it's all good, and the fireworks are going off. But then the scene, this is the best scene. Then Luke, before he goes to join the party, walks over to the edge of the forest and looks and sees the ghost of Ben. The camera pulls back and you see the ghost of Yoda, but then the camera pulls back and you see the ghost of Darth Vader. But it's Sebastian Shaw, the old man, but he doesn't
not Hayden Christensen.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Like Sebastian Shaw doesn't have the scars or anything, and the most important thing is he's smiling. He smiles, and
like he's at peace.
And that smile exactly. It lets you know he's at peace. There's redemption. I'm like, wow, how gratifying is that? Yeah, so then that's why I get so pissed off. Now when you go back and watch it, and Lucas superimposed Hayden Christensen scowling at the camera. I'm like, what? Like, I know the dude can't act, but I mean, come on, like that takes away everything that was accomplished from that scene. So that's why it was my favorite scene, but now it's like my absolute worst scene. So go figure. Just in one little tiny change, can change everything for me. So the original trilogy, as far as I'm concerned, is perfect. So I mean, I can't get into too much. Any scenes in it, as a millennial, like from especially from a science fiction or a special effects point of view, is there anything that you don't like?
To be honest with you, the entire Ewok digression, it seems so incredibly unnecessary. I mean, they could have made them any number of character. It takes what is just such a awesome trilogy, and like it's like the one character to me that is just like so lame. It almost seems like they're pandering to children in that. You know what I mean? It seems like that's where like a corporate entity basically got their hand into it, and that was their corporate creation. You know what I mean? It seems so out of place with the rest of the entire trilogy that like I mean I'll fast forward through those scenes. It's just such a weird diversion from all of the excellence on the other parts of the films. It's actually I get sick thinking about it just because I mean, they're little teddy bears. They're literally little teddy bears. You know, it just doesn't make sense to me.
I know, and I know where you're coming from, and I know it's easy to look at that and think you're right. It's a corporate thing designed to sell toys or to please kids, but really, like, I mean, not to defend any of the original trilogy, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. So, actually, how that came about was Lucas had been really thinking in his mind about doing a movie based on the Vietnam War for a long time. In fact, he was supposed to be the director of Apocalypse Now. He was supposed to be the director up until and Coppola was going to have him direct it, and like that's the way it was going to go. And then at the last minute, obviously Coppola, Star Wars kind of became a bit of a diversion, go figure. And Lucas obviously did not direct Apocalypse Now. But anyway, but Lucas still had in his mind, I want to do something based on the Vietnam War. And so what he liked about the Vietnam War, I guess not liked about it, but what he found interesting and very thematically interesting about the Vietnam War was the fact that a group of people could overcome such a big adverse enemy. How these
like a huge disadvantage.
Huge disadvantage. So you've got these Viet Cong soldiers in the jungle that not that well armed, taking on the most powerful nation in the world and winning. How the hell does this happen? So because of that, he kind of used that thematically by having the Ewoks be very, very short and being very, very primitive. See, originally in his original first drafts of the Star Wars movies, he wanted that battle to be Wookiees.
Wookiees, right. But that's why he literally derived the name Ewok from Wookiee.
Well, and the funny thing was, as a piece of trivia, you're right, as a piece of trivia, because Wookiee backwards or whatever, the two syllables is Ewok, but the word Ewok is never even spoken in Return of the Jedi. Not once. It's something, we know afterward, but if you go back and watch Return of the Jedi, they don't mention the word Ewok once. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But he couldn't make it be Wookiees because he'd already established that Wookiees were smart. Like, Chewie could fly a spaceship. So, I mean, they weren't primitive, So he's like, I got to change this. Well, instead of making them really tall, I'll make them really, really short. Instead of long fur, I'll give them short fur. And that's where kind of the idea. But the idea of using sticks and stones to beat the Empire, and smashing two logs into them and all that, that's why that was put together, sort of thing. I
do like that. I mean, it plays into the whole, like farmers with pitchforks kind of thing. That whole thing. I understand it, but like I just feel like there were so many other like creative ways that they could have done it. But I mean, that's just one. To me, it's one hitch. To other people, it's not a bug at all. It's a feature. But
so, do you have a favorite character from the original?
It's Han.
Oh, good.
Han is just too charismatic, and I think he's actually a lot more emotionally intelligent than people give him credit for. Like, he's just, the whole story of Harrison Ford getting that part, basically, I think he was like a maintenance man, or he was something like that.
Sorry to cut you off, but I love this stuff. So, okay, so actually, the thing with him is,
I knew you would know this.
Okay, so Harrison Ford was in American Graffiti. Okay, and that was Lucas's second film. THX was his first. He made American Graffiti second, and Harrison Ford had a part in that movie, right? And when he went to make Star Wars, he was insisting that the actors be unknowns. He insisted on it, and he didn't want to put Harrison Ford in because Harrison Ford was just in his last movie. So he's like, he's already known, so we can't put him in it. So he actually had Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford is a carpenter by trade, so he was working on the set, and he was like, building sets and stuff like that. And so they were like, well, we need somebody to read sides to the other actors. So in other words, what that means is somebody's got to read the Han Solo part when we're reading, because they audition lots of people for Luke, right? Like they audition people like William Catt, from The Greatest American Hero, like he read for Luke, and all these other actors read for Luke, right? And so somebody has to read Han Solo's part while we're auditioning Luke characters. So, well, Harrison's here. Harrison, can you just read this? And so Harrison would read the part, while they were doing the audition. The only thing was, they started to realize he's pretty good at this. Like, wow, he's really capturing this character. I think we have to go with him. And that's kind of how he ended up getting the part. So, absolutely, he was the right choice. They did look at other people for it, including Kurt Russell, of all people. But, Harrison Ford was definitely the right choice. No two ways about it. But I think he was definitely a good character. I think for me, I've got to go with Darth Vader, only because as a 7-year-old in the theater, when the Star Destroyer comes over and takes over the Tantive 4, and then they blast through the doors and Darth Vader walks in, I was just blown away. I was like, whoa, oh, who is this? This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I was just mesmerized by it. So I think just from that opening scene, he kind of got me. And then, like I say, the whole idea of, at the end kind of tied everything together. And that's the thing, like, really, that kind of got me about the prequels was, all the prequels was basically the kind of like the tragedy of Darth Vader that didn't take three movies to tell. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The other thing too is like in '97 they re-released the original trilogy like with special editions.
Right, those are the ones that we had in my house.
Yeah, and that was where Lucas went in and like added new CGI stuff and new scenes and all this stuff and all this crap to it, and that really got me, because the thing that ticked me off about it was, first of all, just leave the movies alone. They were perfect the way they were. You don't have to add in new scenes. You don't have to add in like a Jawa, coming off of this big creature and swinging around like you're trying to put in comic relief for some reason. Like, just leave it. Like, don't do that, And that whole idea of, they had shot a scene with Jabba where Han Solo is walking with him, and they shot the scene with a guy, playing the part. And at one point, Han walks around him. Well, then they decided, in the third movie, we're going to make Jabba, and they cut that scene out of the movie, obviously, the first movie. And then when they went to make the third movie and Jabba was going to be in it, and they made him into this great big slug, well, when they went back to add that scene into the special editions, they had to CGI him in, and it looked fake and phony, and then they tried to make the walk around be like that Han went up and stepped on his tail.
And then he reacts to it.
Yeah, like, oh, you stepped on my tail.
And it took away all of the grotesqueness of Jabba the Hutt too. It actually it didn't seem to scale correctly.
No, it didn't.
You're used to seeing Jabba basically fill up a room.
Yes, he's
and
he's
all
enormous.
Of a sudden he's he looks almost sickly. He looks smaller than Han does to an extent. It was, they completely emasculated his character, and it was, that one was frustrating. Seeing stuff like the Sarlacc pit. The Sarlacc pit before was perfect. It's a perfect example of less is more. It is literally this gigantic looking, stomach looking bladder thing in the middle of the desert. There's sandfall and everything. It's really, really simple. There, has a couple little thorns and stuff on the side.
And it's got tentacles, and that's it.
Yeah, it has a little bit of tentacles and stuff like that. It's really simple. It's weird, but it also seems strangely realistic. You could imagine seeing this in the middle of a desert somewhere. You know what I mean? It wasn't a stretch to imagine that. So what does he do? He has a gigantic clam thing come out that clumps, like a Venus flytrap or something on it. It was so unnecessary. And doing research for the show, I was looking up some of the changes that they had made, because like I said, I didn't get to see all of the original cuts like you did, literally dozens of times. And it wasn't just, CGI that he had added into it. It was literally hundreds and hundreds of lines of dialogue and sound effects and little snippets of audio recordings that they had of different characters that they kind of just spliced in.
Yep.
That didn't...
actual gunshots they put in for some of the stormtroopers in some of the scenes, actual real gun.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? I agree. And the other thing that ticked me off too was when he did that, then don't ask me how he convinced Spielberg that, hey, this is a good idea to do this. We can go back and change our movies, and we can add stuff in that looks fake. And so Spielberg actually did it too. And it's, maybe not as well known, but he went back and added some scenes to E.T. And where E.T. was running through, the forest and stuff like that, they put in some, and it was just why would you do that? Thankfully, he didn't do anything to Jaws. But anyway, listen, I could literally talk about Star Wars all night long. We could do this 10 times over, but it's time now. I'm going to have a little bit of fun with Yancy. Okay, so let's here we go.
Fun with Yancy.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions on the original trilogy. You've seen them all, so I'm going to keep it super easy for you, okay? Here we go. The original film was released in 1977, obviously. Was it nominated for the Best Picture Oscar at the Academy Awards that year, though? Yancy, do you know? Was it nominated for Best Picture in 1977?
I think, didn't the critics basically tank the first film? So I'm going to say no, it was not.
Incorrect. It was nominated for a Best Picture Oscar in 1977. But I will let you even have a bonus question, though. Okay. So I'm going to give you bonus points if you can name the movie that it lost to.
In 1977?
Yeah.
Give me a hint.
Woody Allen?
Oh my god, I really should know this.
Woody Allen, Diane Keaton?
Nope, I don't know it.
It's named after her character?
I don't know.
Annie Hall. Annie Hall beat Star Wars.
Oh.
I will always remember that, because as a kid, I'm like, how could this neurotic New York guy making this movie be better than Star Wars? What is the Academy thinking? Anyway, okay, so here's an easy one. This Star Wars character was named after the film editor's jargon, Reel 2, Dialogue 2, name the character.
Oh, it's obviously R2-D2.
There you go. Nice and easy one, okay? What's the name of the creature that attacks Luke on Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back?
Oh, it's the Yeti. What is his name? It's a... I do know this.
Okay, I'll nail it down. It's either it's the Sarlacc, is it a Wampa or a Tauntaun?
It's a Wampa.
It's a Wampa. You got it, baby.
The Tauntaun is the thing he rides on.
That's right. Now, I know you know this next one because you mentioned this already. I was going to ask you about Han Solo's famous line right before he gets frozen in carbonite in The Empire Strikes Back, but you obviously know that he says...
I know. Classic.
And the thing is funny, it's like rumor has it that he came up with that line as an improvisation right on the spot, but that's not entirely true. He actually discussed that line, Harrison Ford discussed that line with director Irvin Kershner in his trailer before they ever shot the scene. He got Kershner's blessing on it to actually say that. And but they did a bunch of different takes, and he did use that one, and then, it worked. Lucas did not understand why they would leave that in the cut. Like, he's like, why? That's not funny. And then audiences laughed. And he's like, I don't understand why audience would laugh at that scene. It makes no sense. But if you think about it in the context of that scene, it's a pretty serious scene. Han's about to get frozen and could probably die. And he's like, he's your favorite character, obviously your favorite character, right? And like, so it's a very, very, there's a lot of gravitas going on and a lot of gravity in that moment. And it's very serious. So it was comic relief. Is really how it played. And the audience needed that release. So, but Lucas didn't quite get that. Anyway, okay. I think most people really love the character of Boba Fett, the bounty hunter. What is the name of Boba Fett's spaceship?
Oh, I have no idea, Chris.
Oh, wow. I thought you would know for sure. Oh, wow. It's Slave One.
Slave One?
Okay, so you mentioned this already. So during the Snow Battle of Hoth, which is your favorite scene, what were the Imperial attack units? All-terrain armored transports, better known as?
AT-ATs.
See, this is where I'm really curious because I've always called them AT-ATs.
Oh my god!
I've always called them AT-ATs. That's when I saw the movie. Those are AT-ATs, and they were referred to them. I had the toy, the AT-ATs, the big thing, and I've heard of some other people, and this isn't until years later I'm an adult, and someone's like, "Oh, those are AT-ATs." I'm like, "What the hell is an AT-AT?"
Chris, how old are you?
Well, I'm 46 years old.
You're 46. Okay, my mom is just turning 50 tomorrow, actually.
Yep.
And I remember the first time that she asked me what a meme was, she said, "So what is a meme?" And it's that it's like that same thing.
You're like, oh, it's a character from the Drew Carey Show. What are you talking about? With all the makeup. No, I'm telling you, you know what? I think we got to take a poll somehow because I actually mentioned this to some people, and you know what? They're split. I'm not the only one. I've read into other people, and they're like, no, man, it's AT-ATs. And I mean, no, man, it's AT-ATs. But if you look at it, if it was AT-AT, it would be A dot T dot dash A dot T. It's not. It's AT-AT, so it's AT-AT. I don't know, that's what I call it. Anyway, okay, so I got one final one for you. See if you can do this one.
Okay.
What famous 1980s TV sitcom actor was a commander of the rebel forces on Hoth? And I'll even give it multiple choice. Okay?
These are not easy at all.
I don't know.
You snake.
Okay, I'm going to give you a multiple choice.
Okay.
Stephen Keaton from Family Ties, Michael Gross. Dan Connor from Roseanne, John Goodman. Cliff Clavin from Cheers, John Ratzenberger. Or Balky from Perfect Strangers, Bronson Pinchot. Which one of those guys?
What was number 3?
Cliff Clavin from Cheers, John Ratzenberger.
I'm going to go with Cliff.
You are correct. Cliff Clavin. John Ratzenberger was a commander of the rebel forces on Hoth. Go back and watch it. Yeah, you almost blink and you miss him, but he's there at the beginning. You see the mustache, you see him wearing the thing, and like, oh, hey, that's Cliff Clavin. So
hey, Chris, yep. I know we're up against the time clock, but I have a couple really quick trivia questions for you, too.
Of course, sure. Yeah, of course. Put it on, yeah.
What is the real name of the planet where you find Cloud City?
The real name? Bespin.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
What is the name of Luke's friend from Tatooine who was also killed during the attack on the Death Star?
Biggs.
So whenever they're attacking the Death Star, there are 2 pilots that survive. Obviously Luke. Who is the other one?
Wedge Antilles.
Christopher. My gosh. Okay, well
nice,
done.
Eh?
Last one.
Give me another one. Sure, I'll take it.
Last one.
Yeah.
Finish this line from the famous "Only two shall be there." This is a famous quote. "Only two shall be there, a master and an apprentice. One to embody power and the other to blank."
That's not from the original trilogy.
It's like the theme. They use this in like marketing and everything like that.
Oh, okay.
Only two shall be there, a master and an apprentice. One to embody power and the other to blank.
Abuse it?
crave it. Very
Crave it.
close.
Oh, I'm telling you, that sounds like prequel crap to me. So I don't think that's going to count.
You know what? I will throw you that. It actually may be, but
I think so. That is jargon that's not coming out in the original trilogy. I'll tell you that. Anyway, but anyway, listen. Yeah, you're right. We're up against clocks. So time to go. Time to wrap things up. Like I say, I could talk about Star Wars, the original trilogy, all night long. I seriously could. And
we will again for sure.
Absolutely. And the thing was too, like with Biggs, just going back for a minute on Biggs. Biggs actually had a scene at the beginning of the movie that they cut out, and it was actually Luke was actually looking up in the sky with like through his binoculars, his magic or his electronic binoculars. He was looking up and he was actually seeing the Star Destroyer battling with the Tantive 4. And he was like, what's going on? What is that? So cool. But the scene just died. Like it killed the pace of the film. And Biggs was in it, and there was a girl, and they referred to Luke as Wormy, and it just didn't fit in with the pacing in the film, because originally when the film was cut, that was one of the problems they had. They made the film, they cut it, and it was bad. The cut was not good, so Lucas had to go and bring in. I think it was Richard Chew was the editor, and he got his wife Marcia Lucas to do a lot of the, and then they edited the film down. It just was wonderful, right? But so Biggs had a lot more to do it. That's why even later in the film, when you see him, he's like Biggs. You're like, who the hell is this Biggs guy? You know what I mean? But because in the original scene was cut, right? So it just didn't quite fit in. But anyway, like I said, I could talk about it all night long, but it is time to go. So time to wrap things up. You can reach us on Twitter at @CMcBrien or at Yancy Eaton. Shoot us an email at chris@popgoesyourworld.com or yancy@popgoesyourworld.com. Tell us if it's AT-ATs or AT-ATs, please.
It's AT-ATs,
yeah,
Chris.
It's AT-ATs. For Yancy Eaton, this is Chris McBrien saying thanks for listening to the Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thank you for listening to the Pop Goes Your World podcast. Continue the conversation on Twitter at @CMcBrien or at Yancy Eaton. Please consider leaving a review for the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.